This is a production of Cornell University.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to episode 9 this year of the Cornell Turf Show. We're 5 weeks into our spring series. Our guest today, hopefully, will be John Daniels, USGA agronomist for our Northeast region here. Hoping to have John on later, talking about some of the USGA tools they're coming out with, data that will help superintendents. And of course, if he joins us, I know he's traveling around the Northeast, getting some of his thoughts on what he's seen out in the field here this year. But as always, Frank, let's start it out with you and what we're looking at weather-wise here,
Right.
what we've seen, and what.
Right. Let's go up here. Let's go up here to the videotape. All right, you got me.
Yeah, looks good.
All right, good. Okay, so welcome to the show. Thanks again to the Long Island superintendents and the Met superintendents for providing the funding, and for Richard Brown for just the cutest picture of a future water at East Lake Golf Club down in Atlanta. Love a good smiley face. I think those are Legos maybe heading for my feet. So I know for many years of doing that, it's always good to be sure when you got the little one on the floor. I think if you look close at the tweet, he's got his shoes off too. So you're bound to get him under there. We got to start him young to get him interested in this. So, Carl, before I pass it to you, you walked us through a master's preview a couple of weeks ago, and there was a lot of tweets about the differences between, what happens at Augusta National. And there was a couple of really funny ones where they showed these pictures and then, like showed a car broken down somewhere or a mower broken down somewhere. Obviously, this is something that gets the conversation going in golf every spring because it's in the same place, it's familiar. And as you and I know, there's an enormous amount of resources invested in that. So why don't I pass it to you here and take us through the tip of the day?
Yeah, Frank. So we're doing these tip of the days every week in conjunction with our project with our friends at P2I, looking at BMPs. And we actually talked about this, I believe it was last week, but long grass and looking at the carbon emissions you can save from transitioning from routinely cut rough to these long grass naturalized areas. And today what we want to highlight is not so much what we can gain out of those, but how you figure out, where do I put these areas? And the common issue that we run into is golfers. Golfers are using the landscape. They don't like long grass. So how do we balance the ability to potentially reduce our inputs with, hey, golfers have to use this landscape, and if there's long grass, that inhibits them from using the golf course, slows down play, and makes golfers angry. So the way we can do that is through data. And we're going to show you some data here. If you go to the next slide, Frank, this is data we've used with the USGA's Deacon system. This is part of their Deacon tool. We have John on today to talk more about this, but essentially what we did is we handed out GPS loggers. These were provided to us by the USGA to each of our golfers. We did this for almost 200 golfers at our golf course. You can see, if you're watching the video here, these are the golfer tracks across the entire golf course. You can see where the golfers go. These GPS trackers ping every 5 seconds. And we can figure out, okay, one of the many ways you can use this data is, where do golfers go and where do they not go? And you can see some highlighted areas here. Very obviously, there's a low density of golfers. Maybe 2% of golfers go in some of these areas. These are great long grass candidates and areas to transition. So we actually have a case study here about this project, how much acreage we were able to identify, more than 8 acres onto this golf course that can be transitioned because they are low density areas for golfers. So this is a really data-driven way to kind of convince your golfers, hey, only 2% of our golfers hit it in here. That's a low enough amount of golfers that we can rationalize making that long grass. So we'll talk more with John about this, but one of the many ways you can use data is to outline some of these long grass areas.
Especially the visualization of the data, right, Carl? This exactly. Is data that we collected, and we'll talk more about this with John, and he's with us, right?
Yep.
All right, good, John. Welcome aboard. I hope you haven't seen too much of this. This is the number 3 green at RTJ, back tucked in a corner, not the greatest spot. If Gil gets his hands on it, it's going to look, Gil Hans gets his hands on it, it's going to look very different in the future, but you can see some of the damaged POA, but more importantly, when you look close, Carl's advertisement for bentgrass once again comes out here. And, again, bentgrass getting a bad rap for not doing well early. Here's some bentgrass looking like if I had a whole putting green of it, I might be able to do something with it. So I do think as we get the season going and we talk about the weather a little bit, we get a better sense of how recovery's going. Jed Newsom in Western Mass has been very active, sending pictures about this. Poa went full Undertaker and it rose from the dead without me doing a darn thing. Very interesting, right? I think he has been using covers. I think you can see in the background, the covers are there. So short of the covers, I don't know if he's doing anything, but certainly this is good to keep track of how things are going. It's, this is one of the total upsides of these social media platforms that allow us to understand how things are happening around us that, actually matter. So let's get through some of the weather as we get going. It was a warmer than normal week, but not by much. When you look out into Western PA and out in West Virginia, the high elevations, certainly below normal. As you get closer to the coast, as much as 8 degrees above normal, all the way out on the Cape and the eastern end of Long Island. But for sure in the 0 to 4 degrees above normal. Now, the roller coaster that our weather person, Artie Gaetano, talked about with us this morning was that it looks like we're going to be hitting pause again. Looks like we're expected to be below normal for the next 6 to 10 day outlook. So that's going to have very profound impact on the already important growing degree day development. So on the left, you're seeing that a lot of the areas are right around normal. It's looking like a pretty normal spring, certainly within 3 to 7 days along the coast, and maybe behind 3 to 7 days as you get north and west. Now, degree days are going to start accumulate a little bit more, especially when you get into central Jersey, up the Hudson Valley, into the Connecticut River Valley, up the Pioneer Valley a little bit. You'll start to see 15 to as many as 30 growing degree days, base 50 growing degree days get accumulated in the next 5 or 6 days. So why are we paying attention to growing degree days? Well, you may still be considering seed head suppression. Seed head suppression is probably only marginal in the highest elevations, ideal or early in the highest elevations, marginal as you get south of, basically the Pennsylvania, New York border. Once you get south of that, you're almost out of the ideal range, and embark and proxy in the next several days. If you're doing seed head suppression with these tools, the models seem to indicate it's good timing. Now, on the order of degree days, temperatures, and forsythia as a targeting tool, as a phenological indicator, particularly for the annual bluegrass weevil, we chatted with Rich Buckley this morning, and he reported on the ground that he's starting to see some green in the Jersey area, in North Jersey, green and gold starting to happen on these forsythias as indicators of peak emergence of annual bluegrass. And so Albrecht, the professor at Rutgers, guy who studies annual bluegrass weevil down there, and help people like Ben McGraw and Olga, who we had on last week, study this and get smarter about it, is saying that it's about time for peak germination in New Jersey. So I think when you start to think about the metropolitan New York area, Long Island, I think you should check your various models and tools that you use for this, and begin to consider scouting and looking for peak emergence, right? We talked about this at length last week, that really efficient use of the insecticide is the adulticide application. If you don't have significant pyrethroid resistance, is to time it with peak emergence. One application, peak emergence, get that number down. Now, as Olga said, it doesn't mean that you don't use a larvicide, because we've got a lot of good larvicides that you can time. And again, last week we talked about the potential for pyrethroid resistance to impact the performance of your larvicide in the early phases of that application. So make sure, if you go back and listen to that, this is obviously something you want to be paying attention to. Soils warmed quick, right? Just like the air heat wave, the 2-inch soil temperatures track that air temperature pretty good. You see that we're well into the 50s. So fairy ring applications, take all patch drenches, fungicide drenches that we use early spring for some of our root issues. Might be a little early for summer patch. Summer patch maybe 65 degrees, but you want to start monitoring the soil temperatures. And as my colleague Carl showed last week, a good old meat thermometer will do just as well if you don't want to buy a fancy tool. So let's talk about rainfall for a second. And you can see that swath through northern Jersey, all the way up to the Hudson Valley, into the Adirondacks, a little bit west to maybe Deposit, New York, just east of Binghamton. This swath of 3 to 4 inches of rainfall that went up. This is the kind of thing where you then look at the stark difference where it didn't rain in Buffalo and Rochester last week, and it doesn't look like it's going to be raining in Buffalo and Rochester this coming week. So again, you look south, you see drier conditions, total precip, and you look in that one vein and you're soaked. So one of the things that's starting to happen that Art reminded us of this morning is that now that the sun's starting to move further in the sky, we're getting the contribution from evapotranspiration, right? So you probably should be noticing some of your surfaces beginning to dry a little bit, right? And the 3-day forecast is indicating that it's going to be dry in many areas. And as you look further north and into northern Maine, where it's been fairly dry a lot lately, they're going to get a little bit of rainfall up there, as we say, for the 5 people who live up there. But pretty dry for the next several days, the 3-day moving forward. And some of that is ET is catching up, right? We're at the quarter, starting to approach half an inch for the week, right? So we're starting to lose, maybe 1/10 of an inch a day, creeping in on 1/10 of an inch a day. And the outlook is indicating somewhat normal precip, particularly in the center area, maybe above as you go north and a little bit below normal as you go south. So maybe on the dry side, but maybe some rain coming in before Saturday, or Saturday looks like it's going to be the turning day. All right, we're going to get to our guest, and I'm going to set you up a little bit here, John, giving my little spiel about data driven. I've really liked how the USGA has moved in this direction, as other platforms have as well, but the USGA with the Deacon system making a big splash here. Right. And I think about how, once we figured out how to use numbers in baseball, the impact it's had on the game. I mean, they're starting to change things dramatically because of what happened as a result of using more data. Right. You look at a guy who completely changed his body based on data. So this is more pertinent to golf in particular. Are your golfers using data on your golf course for how they play? Right. My favorite tweeter, Lou Stagner, basically the guy who reminds us how much everybody actually sucks at golf. The best use Lou has, managing your expectations. But those expectations many times are going to be refined more with data. And so you're going to see more of that. And obviously, all the tools that we use to collect the data that drive the things that we manage, are really important. 2 of them in particular, right? Developed in partnership with the USGA. And then we've looked at some large scale data collection tools. Like we've done some soil mapping at the Robert Trent Jones Golf Course over the years with the RX 360 method that Helena uses. We did some EM mapping of the fairways and rough areas on the golf course. And then it allows us to interpret that data in different ways, right? We take the soil samples from the map soils, and then you interpret them using the sufficiency level, and you're going to treat 70% of the fairway. If you interpret that same data using MLSN, you're not going to treat any of that fairway. Now, all of this is predicated on how good your turf looks, right? So you've got to do a little bit of ground truing, even when especially when you look at data at this scale, right? So Carl did a great job a couple of years ago during COVID, showing pictures like this, put the drone up, visualized how the traffic is off the fairway. You get out here into these rough areas, you see the focused traffic in these areas. You see how they basically stayed off the fairway. And of course, last week when we were in Saratoga, Joe Lucas was telling us he makes them drive on the fairway, right? So here's use of data, but this is visual data. So John was kind enough to onboard us last year with the Deacon system. And right away, as Carl's already showed, we spent a couple of days in May, 3 or 4 days in May, passing out these GPS tracking devices to our golfers at RTJ. And this is a heat map of the data. So this is indicating where everybody tees off. Here's another forward tee. This looks like it's a popular landing area. And of course, it looks like everybody's playing to the back of the screen. Some people hit it up short. This is probably Carl's drive over here, right? So Carl and a few of his buddies and his drive over here. So you can visualize the actual data using this. This again is Carl's example. And I like this, Carl. This is where you took out the higher handicappers. And one of the things you drew my attention to, let me see if I can change the color of this thing. Let me make this color blue so you can see it. So Carl, I think you said, you see the spread for these golfers, or at least the majority of them, right down the middle on the first hole. And then you go to the next hole. And again, you see the way bigger spread on the really good golfers, right? These are the less than 7 handicap. Here's the I would call these people good golfers, right around 15. These are the really good golfers, less than 7. And of course, you've demonstrated the value of that data, with the native area, right over here. Yeah. So John, welcome to the show. I got some cool pics. Here you are with good old Pat O'Brien. I didn't know O'Brien was a Steeler fan, but you certainly, as a Missourian, are a Chiefs fan. It was good to see that. And I was also good to see in the USGA page how you guys are promoting this system. And then, so here are the questions for today, John. And I'll bring you in on simple things like this. What are some simple steps guys can do, even if they're not ready for Deacon? What are some simple steps guys can do to get started? And what I like, what the USGA has done is the Deacon system makes it easier for me to talk about it. So I like, and talking about it with golfers essential as well. So I wonder if we couldn't start with that conversation. John, welcome. Good to see you. I've been staring at those slides and not you. So, well, maybe let's start with the data thing. Where should guys start with this?
Well, I think, well, first off, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here and for the setup. I do think throughout the industry, most good golf course operations, they're collecting some amount of data already. And it might be as simple as going out each morning and using a moisture meter to kind of get an idea of where the greens are for that day. And then they communicate that information to whoever's going to maybe be needing to water greens or check greens. They kind of, establish some type of, targeted level that they're going to try to water to and get them, through the day where they have good turf health, but then also good playability. The difference, where you got true, I guess, data geeks versus the, just kind of more art focused superintendents is, a lot of people take those measurements or make that initial assessment, and then they just make a decision and go from there. They don't ever record it, or if they do record it, it's in some Excel spreadsheet that they never really sit down and go through and try to really understand and interpret what those numbers mean or compare year after year. So things like Deacon allow, superintendents just an easier way to put that information in their phone and then not worry about it. In the event they do want to go back and look at the last 30 days, last 2 years, then they can really understand. So it's not like, if they want to start doing it, they have to kind of start from nothing, because most people are doing some type of assessments, whether it's, looking in the buckets and seeing how many, clippings they got and going, maybe I need to, back off on some fertility. Maybe I need to increase my PGR frequency, but, it's just not that much harder to take an actual volume. And then once you take that volume, it's not that much harder just to put it into your phone and then have it in somewhere you can easily access. So, there's a lot of capabilities with some of these different technology tools, but by and large, it's meant to be, 5 minutes or less of your day, and it gives you a real strong historical record.
So that's got to be the key, right? Doing it, making it so it's easy to put in and easy to interpret. Larry Stoll did a podcast with me and scolded us, well, we want them to be data driven, but we don't make it easy for them. Or we want it to be data driven and we're not necessarily giving them actionable data, right? That's, I think, another important thing is, what is data and what is actionable data? What is data that you're going to take action as a result? When you go out and talk to guys like the spiel you just gave us, it's only 5 minutes. I'm still sure you hear like, well, and I don't know how much longer folks like that are going to make it if they don't start doing some data and like many are doing it, but I still feel there's this reluctance to fine tune their practices based on the data. Oh, it's there, I don't do anything with
it. Yeah, I think, sometimes with these programs or new technologies, there's this fear that it's going to be completely automated and there's no decisions made by the superintendent and his staff. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just hopefully going to be able to present it in a way that you can really interpret easily and compare. But you have to decide if that's a good level or not a good level. You got to decide if you want to go faster or slower, if you want to water, you don't want to water, how much. So it doesn't necessarily take the control away from these turf managers who, are so good at what they do. More than anything, it just kind of helps to create like a historical record. So whether they're trying to train somebody else and show this is how we manage our greens, this is how we manage our moisture, this is how we manage our growth, or to their, who they report to, their general manager, their board members, their owner. Those folks don't necessarily have, the bandwidth to understand all the little intricate, pieces that go into making good golf greens, but they can easily look at a graph or a chart and see, okay, trend lines, this is what we've done to date, or this is how we compare to last year. And so, talking about your weather that you were going over this spring and kind of comparing that to last year, you don't have to be a turf expert or a scientist to understand that, okay, it looks like it's been drier than normal here.
Yeah, that's why I'm good at it.
Yeah. So it's kind of taking that same, there's a lot of data that goes into making those colorful charts. And so like a program like Deacon allows you just to enter in a few data points and then those charts are already made. You don't have to be an expert in Excel and taking raw data and trying to create a bunch of macros. And then, if you have an issue, trying to go back and fix it. And where did I put it? Where did I save it? And then having 12 different spreadsheets that don't really communicate to each other.
That's right. So listen, then my old guy question for today. I usually have an old guy question all the time. I was originally motivated to want to be better at turf beyond a 4-year degree when I met the late Jim Snow. So I wanted to get a master's degree and be a USGA agronomist. So I've been paying attention to all the knuckleheads that have gone before you, right, that you've replaced, that I love dearly and have done a great job. I mean, obviously, the USGA's has evolved over the years, and now it looks like, based on what you're doing here, that it's a much more focus on playability. What are the kinds of things we can help superintendents talk to people about the playability of the golf course? Not mowing heights and this and that, but what the golfer experiences. This looks like it's a first step. What else are you guys thinking about relative to playability, or things you would like to see us be doing more with regard to communicating directly about playability, which has been pretty much confined to green speed?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit more firmness now, but what else are the kinds of things you talk about with playability that are critical for, to have some data to do that and talk to the golfers?
Yeah. Well, I mean, green speed, for so many years, just looking at, the putting conditions, it's been pretty much one dimensional. And it's been, we've got this this easily measured, tool that allows us to kind of go through and put a number, and then golfers hear it, and you hear it on broadcast, and then it's over the years become, well, faster is clearly better. So a 12 is better than an 11, and 11 is better than a 10. And I think for a number of years there that was true. When you look at when the late 70s, when the kind of modern stent meter was released, and we did like 1,000 putting green survey throughout the country, you had a lot of greens that were rolling 7.5, maybe topping out at 8 feet. Well, now we have tees and collars that roll that fast, and so they're smoother, they're truer, and so I think for a number of years that was a great thing. But just even in the last decade, we've really seen where those excessive speeds have really taken away from some pretty cool golf courses, some neat architectural features. We've reduced the number of available hole locations on greens because we're running these golden age designs at speeds that were never even thought of. So now there's kind of this idea of, well, how do we kind of rein that in and try to find an ideal range? And so that's something that I think is a popular discussion now, using the stent meter. But for the last couple of years, we at the USGA have been working on some other ways to measure putting green performance. And our newest tool that we have, that we're still going through like a beta testing with it, and really trying to better understand how greens vary throughout the year. But it's called the GS3, and basically it's a smart golf ball that measures not only green speed, so we can correlate that back to our historical reference point of a stent meter reading, but it allows us to measure the surface smoothness and trueness. So both the vertical deviation and then the lateral deviation. So it puts a number to these surfaces. Right now, we are going through kind of a testing phase of looking at all different types of grass species, all different parts of the country, trying to get some good baseline information. But eventually, this tool will be available for golf courses, and it'll allow us to kind of change the discussion from green speed to maybe, at what speed are our greens the smoothest and trueness, they roll true, because at the end of the day, when you see your golf ball wobbling, doesn't matter how fast they are, that's going to be kind of in your head, and that's going to make you miss putts. So that's one tool that incorporates and works closely with Deacon, and something we're working on. As far as like kind of overall golf experience outside of the putting greens, last couple of years we've also been doing some work with some like hotel restaurant management type experts, looking at from like a hospitality standpoint, when a golfer steps foot on a golf course, from the minute they park their car to the minute that they leave, that entire experience.
Journey mapping.
And so how they what aspects and course conditions, I mean, by and large, from the initial research, are a huge a factor in their overall experience. But there's a lot more to it as far as how they're greeted, how they the condition of the cleanliness, the condition of golf carts, everything kind of goes into it, that overall experience. But conditions and things that superintendents are directly responsible for are top of the list.
Excellent. So listen, before I got one last question before I let you go, because you didn't mention firmness. Where are you guys with firmness? Because I think getting it firm makes a lot of these other things really easier to do. Are we dialing in firmness? I mean, I know you guys developed the True Firm, and then there was this other device that the Scout, the other one, and then the PGA uses the ball with the chain, right? So where are you guys at with firmness? And then Carl, you can ask a question or two, and we can get out of here. Where are we at with firmness?
So we still use the original True Firm for all our championship preparations. So here at the Country Club, and I don't know how many days, but it's coming up here pretty soon. we will be, using that tool along with the stint meter to kind of, make sure we've got the greens in a consistent fashion and kind of where we want from a championship perspective. So we still use that. There's the Spectrum. We partnered with them to offer a similar unit that can, give a number to a superintendent that's commercially available. Like you said, the PGA Tour uses a chain and a heavy ball, and then a caliper to measure how big an indentation is on the surface. The GS3 that I referenced earlier also can measure firmness. So we put it in a weighted device, drop it similar to the True Firm, and it communicates that information via Bluetooth to our phone. So we can, so it incorporates that as well. Firmness is a very important topic, I think, with putting greens, but throughout the golf course, approaches, fairways. So I think having a way to objectively measure firmness and kind of correlate that to your skill level of golfers and try to find an ideal range is important. And maybe we can push back on sometimes of these I would think, a lot of times false narratives of, well, the superintendent just likes to overwater, or we're clearly doing something that, versus maybe the discussion needing to be, well, we could utilize some drainage in this area. We don't have any, very good soils that they're slow draining. Maybe we could, do something in that regard. So firmness is still important. And I think to the highest caliber of player, it's something that's, on their radar equally as green speed or any of these other topics.
Perfect. Carl?
On that topic, John, in the last couple of years, I think there was this sort of, quote unquote, COVID boom, a lot of people coming out to golf courses, spending more money. I've been seeing more projects, more infrastructure projects on golf courses. Mm-hmm. You talk about the false perception that superintendents are overwatering. Really, Mother Nature has overwatered us, at least here in New York recently, a lot of the Northeast. Are you seeing more money spent on drainage projects in your recent travels?
Yeah, I think last year throughout the Northeast, there was a lot of areas that were pretty wet throughout the golfing season, and you add more play to those areas, whether it's golfer foot traffic or golf carts. These weaknesses really show up, especially when you go from 15,000 rounds to 20 to 25,000 rounds. So you see these weaknesses within your overall infrastructure. So yes, I think drainage in fairways, greens, even some of the winter injury we're seeing, guys deal with right now. A lot of it goes back to drainage, and so having a green that drains well in the winter, early spring is important for maybe limiting winter injury. But it's equally important, during July when you've got a big tournament and you're trying to get out there and mow and get people to, play golf. So I think the last, since we've had 2 years of really good golf activity, I think people are very comfortable in trying to address some of these weaknesses. And that's why we've seen this huge, flurry of activity from a lot lot of projects.
Thanks for taking the time to join us, John. What a joy to have you. It's so great. That's so great.
Thank you
Carl,
for the opportunity.
Yeah, glad to have you. Carl?
Yep, excited to hear that the USGA working on these data things. We're awaiting that GS3 device. We've been screwing around with children's toys and other machines for a while now, so that's interesting to us. Thanks everyone for joining. You can find some links below in the YouTube video to this USGA research John was talking about the involving the hotel people, satisfiers, dissatisfiers, every part of the golf experience is included in there. I'd highly suggest you check that out, not just from a conditioning perspective, the experience as a whole. But thanks, John, again for joining us. We'll see you guys tomorrow with Doug Soldat talking soils.
Excellent. Bye.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.